South Carolina, 1995. A seriously injured man is found lying on a rural road in Anderson County.
They saw him and almost ran him over and was able to stop. Back then there was no cell phone, so they'd go to a neighbor's house, call 911.
The injured man is quickly identified as 24-year-old local man Richard Martin, and it is clear his injuries are not the result of a mere accident.
When law enforcement arrived, Richard was still on the road and unconscious, but breathing.
Richard Martin had sustained blunt force trauma. It was so severe, it didn't seem like fists could do this.
We got to the hospital. As minute I went in that room, I knew my son was gone.
This brutal killing spurs investigators and the victim's own family alike to seek justice.
We started our own investigation then. That was our drive.
We were fearless. We went places where two females probably shouldn't go. But determination and the love for Richard is what really drove us.
Investigators quickly start to lean into potential suspects as a motive begins to emerge.
It's hard to understand the inner workings of jealousy all the time and where that comes from, but it was just so senseless.
He attacked Richard for something that every guy in their 20s has done at some point in their life.
In his mind, he was going to teach Richard a lesson, one final lesson.
This is the story of 24-year-old Richard Martin and how he was savagely murdered at the hands of a green-eyed killer.
Anderson, South Carolina, it's a very tight-knit southern community. Everyone knows everyone. It's got that homey feel to it. But also because it's in between Charlotte and Atlanta, you got a lot of people passing through.
Probably 230,000 folks in Anderson County at this point. So it's a fairly large county. A lot of beautiful scenery around here. We're close to the beach and we're close to the mountains. So the mountains are just north of us. And we have a lot of lakes that are around us and a lot of recreational activities that go with the lake, and fishing and people that ski and wakeboard and all that fun stuff.
Mix of working class people, very salt of the earth people, close enough to some big cities that you can get there in a relatively short amount of time and still live a pretty quiet life. So I think this is a very up and coming area. It's becoming a very desirable area to live.
Anderson, South Carolina was a bit different when this story took place on September 2nd, 1995. It was a lot more homier, there was a smaller population, so as tight-knit and as wonderful as it is today, I think it was even more tight-knit back then.
But just after 1 a.m., the peace of Anderson County is disturbed when a shocking discovery is made on a rural road.
At around 1:15 a.m., a couple driving a car find a body on the side of this rural back road called Welcome Road. He was badly beaten. It was very severe.
Just a random couple that came down the road. They had to go, of course, to a neighbor's house to use a phone because nobody had cell phones then.
What they do is they find the first house they can find, and they alert authorities that, hey, we have found a body here on Welcome Road.
The man is badly beaten, but still clinging to life. Emergency responders arrive on scene.
The initial responding officers would have established the crime scene and basically waited for detectives to get there. Detectives probably would have shown up about 45 minutes later, and by that point the victim had already been transported to Greenville Memorial Hospital for treatment.
The victim is identified as 24-year-old Richard Martin.
Richard Martin was a local man. He was raised in the area by his mother, a single woman, Ada Martin. He was a little bit introverted, but he still had friends. People liked him. He loved nature and animals. At the time, he was 24 years old, and he was working hard. He was trying to renovate a farmhouse to make his own, and he just had a lot going for him at the time.
He grew up in the country. There were only 4 or 5 houses on our road at the time. We both stayed in the woods whenever we could. We had 2 acres, and it was probably another acre between and less than a mile to his granddaddy's house. So he was up and down the road all the time. He would ride the tractor with Daddy, and he helped Mother in the garden. He was always a helper. He was always a giver.
Richard was an only child. However, he did have a sibling-like relationship with his cousin Melissa. They went to school together, they came home together, they would play outside together. So, that was really special. They had a really special bond between them.
Richard and I were cousins, and we lived next door to each other growing up. He was 2 years younger than me. But despite that, he always thought, even from a little boy, I guess, that he was the man in the relationship, and he was the protector in our lives. So whether we were in the woods or outside playing or in the house or whatever it may have been, he was going to make sure that I was taken care of. I was the China doll, and he was the man. So he always went first if we crossed the creek or he thought there might be a snake or whatever. He was the guy, right?
As he grew up, we hiked in the mountains to a point where he called one of the local mountains Mom's Pet Rock. And we camped as often as we could when he wasn't with his dad. We divorced before he turned 2. We camped on the beach, we camped in the mountains, we've camped on the lakes. We just did it every other weekend. And back then it was inexpensive. It didn't cost that much to do it. And there's plenty of places around here to take a teenager or a young man where he can take his friends later. And then later on, as a teenager, he took his buddies to the places that we had discovered on our adventures. Of course, as he even grew older, between his 11th and 12th grade, he worked during the summer putting up roofing because he wanted to buy a candy apple red Mustang. And he did. He was a giving person. And because of that, before he got his license, he put on there that he would be an organ donor. After graduation, he moved out to a little 2-bedroom house, not far from here again, where he was at that time doing vinyl siding, riding back and forth to work with me because our work was just a few miles apart. He was out on his own, and that he was already about 20 by then. So he was doing things that young men do at the time. He had long hair, he had tattoos, and he smoked, and he drank his beer. We were mom and son. There was a lot of times that he did things he wasn't supposed to, but then on the other hand, he was always there to help me. And even if we fought, the next morning we were okay. He was still mine, and I was proud of all he had accomplished.
September 2nd, 1995 was a typical Friday for Richard Martin. He'd finished work and he wanted to take a load off.
Friday afternoon, I let him out at his gate, and he turned around. He said, "Thanks, Mom. I love you."
He headed to the Waffle House. He knew some people there, and they made plans to meet up later at Nancy's. He ate at the Waffle House, then he went to Nancy's. And that was it. That's how his Friday night went, which was very standard for any young man. He has a few beers, maybe one too many, as is the case with many 24-year-olds, but it's a good night. The weekend is here and he's ready.
It may seem like a normal Friday night in Anderson County, But only a few hours later, his mother Ada receives a phone call.
The next thing we knew, my mother was calling to say that he had been injured.
Richard has been discovered seriously injured in the middle of a rural road. As emergency responders race him to the local hospital, it is clear that this is a sustained attack, and Richard has been left fighting for life. On the night of September 2nd, 1995, a man is discovered lying motionless on Welcome Road, badly beaten and barely alive. He's identified as 24-year-old Richard Martin. His family is stunned by the news and rushes to the hospital, fearing the worst.
We got to the hospital. Melissa's mother happened to work on that floor, the trauma center, and she got us upstairs real quick. And from time to time, we were able to go into the room, and it was terrible. Part of his long hair, which was down to his shoulders, had been shaved. One eye was closed, swollen closed, and he had granite blue eyes, so I could barely see one. He had place across his nose, and all those tubes going everywhere because they were keeping his body alive at that time. They did not think there was any hope. The severe head trauma had done so much damage. But we did. We spent several hours in there before they asked if I would willing to donate his organs. As the minute I went into that room, I knew my son was gone. And knowing my son being such a giving person, I went ahead and donated because that's what he wanted to do. He gave his last gift was his organs. We wished they could have used his eyes, but they were too damaged. We stayed around until he was pronounced, and then we came on home. The next morning I woke up hoping that it had been a nightmare, but it wasn't.
There was some speculation too at the time that perhaps he was hit by a car, or hit by a truck mirror or something like that, but his injuries just didn't match up.
Richard suffered blunt force trauma to his head. It's our belief that that was the cause of his death.
It definitely matched with blunt force trauma as a result of somebody hitting somebody else with a blunt object, basically. Maybe a kind of weapon.
This was not an accident. This was malicious in nature.
Detectives immediately move the attack to a case of homicide and begin to secure the scene.
Our forensics today are so much better than they were back then. Back then, you didn't know really to collect DNA from blood samples and stuff like that, and fibers that may have come off of someone's shirt just because the technology wasn't there. So there was not a whole lot of physical evidence left at the scene other than Richard's blood and everything else. It just looked personal. The scene surrounding his death, the whole thing looked, there was something personal there.
There wasn't really any physical evidence. No DNA to speak of. The murder weapon was never recovered.
With no evidence emerging, investigators appeal for witnesses.
Very boots on the ground, old school type of police work where you have to go knock on doors, and that's how you get these cases solved when you don't have DNA evidence and physical evidence. From witnesses, we know that he went to Nancy's bar just looking to have a good time, drank some White Russians and some beers, and by all accounts, it was a normal night.
He's having a good time. He's a single 24-year-old, and when suddenly there's a girl who catches his eye, and there's some chemistry there.
They had a dance together. They were talking with each other. Nice looking lady, and so Richard caught her eye.
However, witnesses report that this interaction sparked a confrontation.
Richard's having a good time, but across the bar, there's a much older gentleman who's not happy about what's going down. He sees across the way, he sees Richard with his friends, he sees Richard with this girl, and everyone there can sense that. He's simmering, he's not happy with what he sees, he's stewing, he's angry, and he does confront Richard.
He was jealous over the girl. That's what we have consistently heard. There was an altercation between him and then Richard, perhaps some of the others that were in the group. Some yelling, some verbal altercations going on, maybe a little physical.
Nancy's isn't really known as a place where a lot of fights happen or anything like that. From everything that I read about Nancy, she kind of ran a tight ship over there. She was very protective over her bar. There was not a place that was known to have some fights. At one point, Richard had become sick and threw up on the dance floor. At that point, Richard was escorted out of the bar.
They say, "You've been overserved, enough's enough, get out." This confrontation is the last time anyone sees Richard alive.
In these witness accounts, there is one name that comes up time and time again.
The common denominator with all these witness accounts at Nancy's bar was Bobby. Bobby McLean, Bobby McLean, Bobby McLean. Everyone saw him fighting with Richard.
Witnesses that had pointed Bobby out as an individual that helped escort Richard out of Nancy's on the night that he was killed. So Bobby was identified fairly early in the investigation as a person of interest.
McLean is brought to the police station for questioning.
He had submitted to a polygraph examination. It's a machine that you basically get hooked up to, and it measures all sorts of physiological responses in order to questions. Some people don't necessarily 100% trust it. Some people say, well, of course, he's going to be nervous. He was getting interviewed by the police. There is science to it, whether it be your breathing rate, your heart rate, your brain waves and activity. Basically, it just gives us an idea and a picture that says if you are being truthful or you're being deceitful to questions that we're asking.
He does fail it, however. Once questions start coming around about, was there a confrontation between you and Richard? Was there a fight between you guys? It was fail, 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 fail.
There was deceit and there was deception on questions specifically relating to the murder of Richard Martin. Because on some other questions, there was no indication of deception. So when it comes to that, it's just another tool that we can use as investigators to say, this person's not telling us the whole truth. They might tell the truth about where they were, but they're not going to tell us the truth about what their activities were. They're not admissible in court. So we can't use them in court, but we can use them as a tool throughout the investigation.
Bobby McLean fails the polygraph test, but detectives do not have enough evidence to charge him.
I think Richard was an easy target for Bobby. And I think, anger issues combined with alcohol, I think he picked Richard out as a soft target.
McLean was the prime suspect, but there just wasn't anything to tie him physically to the crime scene, and so that made it too challenging to charge him with anything.
While McLean remains a suspect, investigators pursue other lines of inquiry.
Investigators had a lot to work with because not only was there the fight at Nancy's bar between Richard and Bobby, but elsewhere at another place called Randy's bar, there was another pretty violent encounter. There was another fight over there. So there was a lot of chatter going around, and that's a lot to sift through. And then, of course, 1995, you don't have surveillance. So a lot of it's word of mouth, especially in these smaller towns.
There were rumors that Richard had gone to Randy's, which is another bar, and that he was involved in a fight there. I think when you have that many different stories out there, to narrow in on one is hard.
It's a very unique investigation, especially in these small towns. People aren't inclined to come forward because they do know the suspect often. They know the suspect's family. Everything's so tight-knit, and so that becomes challenging for investigators.
I think that the investigators did great police work. I just think that there was too many loose ends to definitively go forward with specifically the Bobby McLean killed Richard Martin angle.
Desperate for answers, Richard's family tries to help with the investigation.
We gave them every information that came to us. And in February of '96, the original investigator said the way it was, there was no new evidence, and there was nothing else he could or would do until something else came in.
With no concrete evidence tying Bobby McLean to the murder of Richard Martin and no other leads emerging, the case goes cold and the killer remains at large. Without enough evidence to charge a suspect, the investigation into the 1995 murder of Richard Martin in Anderson County goes cold, but his family refuses to let the crime be forgotten.
In February of '96, the original investigator said there was no new evidence. After that, they shut us down every way. I would spend my 10-minute breaks for lunch from working to call the office and see if we heard anything.
Jim had, as a detective, had put a lot of work into that case, really worked hard on it. Meanwhile, investigating other cases, and I think he did a really good job on a lot of cases. I don't think Richard's case was ever forgotten.
With detectives busy on other cases, Richard's family decide to take on the case themselves.
The first investigator basically told us there was just nothing else he could or would do. And so Ada and I, at that time, said, well, if he will not, we will.
We started our own investigation then. That was our drive.
We could not just sit back and let Richard just not ever have answers for what happened to Richard. Richard would have moved heaven and earth, climbed every mountain, and swam every sea if that had been his mother or I or any of our other family members, and we had to do the same for him.
Ada Martin, she took a very boots-on-the-ground approach, knocking on doors, talking to everybody. She was not going to stop until she found out who killed her only child.
We didn't even have computers, but Melissa's mother-in-law did, and we did our first flyer. We put those out. Anytime anything came, we went back, and if we considered it a lead, we learned that along the line. Not a clue, but a lead. We would trace it down, and if it was good, we would take it to the sheriff's office, and they would either turn it down or see what they could find. They always wanted information that had a name behind it, and sometimes people didn't want to give a name. We learned that the hard way.
The determination and the love for Richard is what really drove us. I was in my 20s also when Richard was murdered, and so I still had some growing up to do myself. Even though I had 2 kids and was married, I was still very young. And I was learning to navigate life that young, and a lot of other things happened in our family, though, even along with Richard. My dad died, my mom died, Ada's sister. My aunt was killed in a car wreck. All of these things happened within several years of each other. So we were navigating all of these things in life while we were trying to solve a homicide. So it was determination, just sheer drive and love.
One of the wonderful things about Ada is that she was the constant detective in this case. And so as the sheriff's office saw multiple administrations come and go over the years, she was there. And sometimes, that can be frustrating. You have to reacquaint yourselves with the law enforcement working on Richard's case. You have to, fill them in on all the gaps. You have to, get them familiar on the case. And I think that's just was something really spectacular about her, was that she continued to evolve as this case evolved, as law enforcement evolved over the years.
Richard's mother, Ada, had a hand in making sure that no matter who the sheriff was, you were going to know Richard and know his case. I feel like all the sheriffs, it was important to them, Ada's case, and I just think that our guys, we have some very great detectives, and so one thing that we did is we just kept putting fresh eyes on it.
It's so important for parents of murdered, children to keep their faces and their names out there. And one of the ways that Ada did this was she created these playing cards. She had her son's face and his information printed on these playing cards to be dispersed in the prison system. And that's such a neat tool, isn't it? Because you have people behind bars who be like, hey, I've heard something about this, or, perhaps I shared a cell with somebody who mentioned this. It can really ring a lot of bells.
We had been on the news, we had been in the newspaper, we did a local radio talk show one time. There was no way we would ever stop.
Over the years, we've been told all kind of different stories, things that we disproved to ourselves. We knew better. One was a girl talking about his polo shirt. My son never wore a polo shirt. He wore Harley Davidson t-shirts. That was his brand. And things like that we didn't take because we knew it wasn't right. We learned where he was on Welcome Road. The folks had actually found him. Then we went to their living room and sat down. They were delightful people. They were an older couple coming home from vacation, and they found him in the road. And we actually talked to the people whose house he was found in front of time and time again. They were just friendly people.
We were fearless. We went places where two females probably shouldn't go, and we were prepared for that. We would talk to anybody that would talk to us.
Of course, we run into a lot of people that didn't want to talk to us at all. One of those was Bobby McLean. I did speak to him one time because I thought he was a witness. Bobby didn't want to talk to us at all.
Ada gets no further information from Bobby McLean. Months turn into years, but she refuses to give up. In 2014, 19 years after Richard's murder, a Facebook page is created to raise awareness and invite potential witnesses to come forward.
We just wanted to get his name out there more. And Richard's page, it's been a good outlet for Ada, Richard's mom. And for me, it's been a good way to keep his case out there. We have also received messages and leads on Richard's case through Richard's page. I can't say that any of them really probably led to anything that was groundbreaking, but we have received leads, which is great.
We did the yards and benefits to make money for his reward. It was out there. It got up to $10,000 at one point, and still nothing came in.
You want to keep your case alive. Unfortunately, that is up to the family. As hard as that is to say, and as hard as that is to do, that's what it takes. It's hard. It's a hard path. We haven't come all this way just to stop.
Despite the lack of solid leads, Richard's family's devotion keeps his case alive. In 2017, their persistence finally pays off when a witness comes forward with crucial new information. In 2017, 22 years after the murder of 24-year-old Richard Martin, a new sergeant is assigned to the case. Much like Richard's family, he is determined to finally solve it.
In 2017, that's when Sergeant Hill came to the county from Greenville, and he just got right on it.
My name's Scotty Hill. I'm a staff sergeant with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office in the Criminal Investigations Division. The case was assigned to me, so one of the first things you want to do when you're assigned a case is meet the families. So I met Ada and realized really quickly that Ada was a different kind of victim's mother in a good way, a very positive way. She is very much a mother who was not going to rest until she got justice for her son.
There wasn't a person in law enforcement who came through the Anderson County Sheriff's Office without meeting, who didn't meet Ada. I mean, she got everyone's number there, and Sergeant Scotty Hill comes along and he sees this case and he really takes it home.
He started the ball rolling as far as reopening the case and trying to get to an answer on who killed Richard Martin.
Richard was from the same area I grew up in, so, I remember even as a kid kind of hearing stuff about it, not a whole lot. There was billboards and stuff in the area about the unsolved murder of Richard Martin.
As long as Scotty was there, we would have meetings at least twice a month or any other time that we wanted one or he wanted to talk to us.
Ada's investigative work was instrumental in getting the new investigators caught up in the case.
She has all the details of everything she's ever concluded herself and findings from various detectives over the years.
The notebook is well known in the Criminal Investigations Division.
She's held on to that notebook. She had it with her in case somebody came up to her and gave her a piece of information, or she learned something new real quick. She would add it to the book. And so that book, of course, worked hand in hand with our detectives. Like I said, she wasn't going to let any detail of Richard's case fall by the wayside.
So mind you, it's been 22 years since this couple found a broken body on the side of the road. But thanks to Ada, and now with this new guy, Scotty Hill, in the case, there's new life breathed into it, and there's a lot of renewed interest, and things are starting to move, and one of those moving parts is a witness who comes forward.
In June of 2017, the witness said he came forward because it was just wearing on his conscience that he knew about Richard's death and had never come forward before. That he just said he got to the point where he couldn't even sleep at night. He had to tell somebody what he knew about the case. He remembered being involved in a fight, or at least present at a fight that happened the night Richard died. He said it happened at Nancy's bar. Once I started running down some of the people the names he had given us that were involved in this fight, I asked him if he knew Bobby McLean, and he laughed and said that was his father-in-law at the time of Richard's death. So we started talking to him about Bobby, and that's when we got a lot of background information on Bobby and what kind of person he was, especially at the time of Richard's death. We learned that Bobby would go to bars and drink. He would flirt with women. If someone interfered with him flirting with a woman, he got very angry, very envious, and would try to fight that person. We found out that he always carried some sort of blackjack or small baseball bat, as it was described, with him. Found out he had a very short, hot temper. He had tried to assault his son-in-law on several occasions, even swinging a tire iron at him at one point, barely missing him.
It's kind of reinstating that we're dealing with a man who is prone to violence and pretty prone to jealousy.
The most interesting thing he told us was that shortly after Richard died, Bobby completely changed. He stopped going to bars. He changed his lifestyle completely, which is that's about the time I realized there was something connected there, that's not a normal thing. Bobby McLean was a suspect from day one, it appears. They interviewed him very shortly after Richard was discovered, after Richard passed away. He was even given a polygraph examination back in 1995.
Something that's really curious about this was that he was actually married at the time in 1995. But his wife was very unaware of what happened. She had no idea that her husband was questioned. And it really begs the question, like, well, if you're an innocent person, why wouldn't you tell your wife, hey, I was questioned by police for something I didn't do? So it's very peculiar.
So it seems like he was a suspect from the beginning of the case. As far as my investigation, he became the primary suspect to me.
With the spotlight back on Bobby McLean, police set out to track him down. But on investigation, they receive information that stops them in their tracks.
With this newer 2017 investigation, of course, it would be natural that law enforcement wants to talk to McLean. However, he's been dead now for some time. He died from stomach cancer and other medical complications in 2010.
It would have been great to be able to go back and speak with Bobby again, but unfortunately we never got that opportunity.
Despite this, investigators are still determined to solve this case once and for all and name Bobby McLean as Richard Martin's killer.
We hired what we call a ringer from New York City, Detective Corey Smith, who retired from the New York Police Department as a cold case investigator in 2024. And so when Detective Smith got here, the first case I wanted him to look at was Richard's case. And in fact, he started, and I think on the second day, I don't even think he had his office completely set up. I just brought the case in and said, read this case and tell me what you think.
Sergeant Hill came in and dropped the box off on my desk and said, here, read this. Didn't give me any idea as far as what his thoughts were, what his opinions were, and I appreciated that. And I think over the course of about 8 weeks, it took me to get through the whole case and put some things together and organize it. We were able to, I was able to sit down with him, and he asked me what I thought and who I thought killed Richard Martin, and I flat out told him Bobby McLean. We kind of compared notes and had some back and forths, and I think that between the two of us and the work that he had done, which again he did great job, he did great work. I think we were able to kind of put our heads together, and I told him, we had a conversation, said we need to get the solicitor involved. So once we agreed on that, we were able to put a presentation together. I put a PowerPoint together where it kind of just laid out the entire case, showcased injuries, that it made sense and everything that we had found. And when they came and they listened, I was able to present it to them. And at that point, they said that we would have had probable cause to arrest Bobby McLean for the murder of Richard Martin.
We were able to announce on May 13th of 2025 that Bobby McLean was the suspect in Richard's death. And we did that through a press conference here at the sheriff's office.
They said in the press conference, Richard danced with a girl, and it's believed that it made somebody angry, which is really crazy. Nobody's life is worth, I'm mad at you because you danced with a girl. To take somebody's life for that is just crazy.
Bobby McLean's actions was just textbook jealousy. I mean, this was a man who just could not stand the idea of Richard Martin dancing with another woman, just having a fun time, just being a 24-year-old young man. He hated that. Why? Why? Because he was jealous. It's only a short time after that McLean and a bouncer at the bar escort Richard Martin out.
And I think Richard probably left because he felt like that was probably the best thing for him to do, is just go ahead and leave, get out of there. I think he drove up on him, got out of the truck, there's probably some words exchanged, and I think Bobby pulled something out of the truck, a blunt object of some kind, and I think he just started probably wailing on Richard. And, did he intend to kill him? I mean, I don't, if you're hitting somebody with some kind of object, you got to realize what the potential outcome's going to be. I think in his mind he was going to teach Richard a lesson, one final lesson. Left him for dead on the side of the road.
It's hard to understand the inner workings of jealousy all the time and where that comes from, and where that came from McLean, but it was just so senseless.
I refer to Bobby McLean as an animal, and I've always wondered about whether when he was in the front of his mirror shaving or something, did he see Richard behind his shoulder or something? And how can anybody carry that for years?
Jealousy can make people do some crazy stuff. Jealousy and pride is one of those things that definitely creates a lot of destruction in its path.
Ultimately, we didn't get to put handcuffs on somebody. Yes, we're there and we know what happened. To not be able to actually put the handcuffs on somebody and get them in front of a judge to see that part of it through, I think that this one's always going to stand out for that reason too.
You might say I'm mad at Bobby McLean for not being here to stand trial. I can't help it. I wanted that. We have fought for that all these years, and I just feel cheated.
And it's a little frustrating, and as an investigator, because you always want that day in court. But we did the best we could with what we had, and we're able to give Ada and all of Richard's family some type of conclusion.
I don't use the word closure. Even if someone had been arrested and convicted in 1995, it would never close the hole in my heart because my son is not with me. I use the word conclusion to that part of Richard's story.
Without the incredible help of Richard's family, the conclusion of this case would not have been possible. Today, his family offer support to other families suffering similar tragedies.
We haven't come all this way just to stop. There's still other things for us to do. There's still work. This may not be Richard's, but there's still other families, and there's still other families that need support, and they need help navigating this life. Because this is a hard life. I'm glad we kept fighting. And if anybody ever, if they came to me today and said, well, here's a little piece, there might be something else, you know what we would do? We'd be on the trail. We just would, because that's who we are.
We're going to continue to keep his memory going and give other families a visual that they can see. They don't have to sit back in a corner, and my son's responsible for that.
Beaufort County, South Carolina. Emergency services respond to a 911 call at Harrison Island Road and find 24-year-old Jillian Angner in a critical condition with a gunshot wound to her neck.
It wasn't on a busy street. It wasn't in a busy neighborhood. It was secluded.
This was premeditated. This was a targeted crime. This was deliberate.
Jillian's 6-year-old son witnesses the senseless attack on his mother, but manages to escape to safety.
Her son was in the back seat and had to crawl out of a broken window, and he fled into the marsh because he was scared.
Police learn about an ex-boyfriend who had stalked Jillian after their breakup the previous year.
He would come to her place of business. He would send her flowers there. He would leave Legos on top of her car for her child. She started parking in different locations because, that just made her feel uncomfortable.
These first 6 months after separating from an abuser have a heightened risk of intimate partner homicide for women.
There was a break-in to her house a few months prior that the family believed was him.
This is the story of a cruel and premeditated obsession that turned deadly and ended in a family tragedy.
His last words to her were, "Well, I'm not going to give up."
The coastal town of Bluffton is located in Beaufort County, South Carolina.
Beaufort is a beautiful spot in the Low Country. It is on the Intercoastal Waterway.
Everybody's pretty close knit together. You pretty much know what's happening everywhere on the island at all times.
People love going out on the May River on their boats. Everyone kind of knows everybody. Depending on your last name, you might have some history planted here. It's that kind of town.
On the morning of March the 2nd, 2023, 24-year-old Gillian Angner leaves her home on Harrison Island Road with her 6-year-old son.
Jillian was very close with her family. She lived in a residence on their property, but it was detached from them.
She was leaving to take her 6-year-old son to school when she was ambushed and multiple shots were fired at her vehicle. Jillian's son was a 6-year-old boy at the time, and he was put in a position that nobody should be put in to watch his mother go through what she did.
Her mother, Beth, down the street had heard the shots and actually was the first person to come across Jillian slumped over in the driver's seat, and then her son coming out of the marsh saying, "Mommy's dead, can I come live with you?"
Jillian's family members call 911 and first responders race to the scene.
The initial call came out for road patrol to respond, and you just knew at that moment we were going to need several investigators to go out there. This is going to be something not normal to get that call at 7:30 in the morning.
Harrison Island Road is just a little peninsula on the marsh that is purely residential. There are no businesses down there, so there's not through traffic.
There's only a few other houses past where this happened, so we kind of knew this wasn't an average shooting. It was something personal to this.
While Jillian's family cares for her son, Jillian is transferred to the nearest emergency room, where responders continue to try and save her life.
There are paramedics and fire department personnel on scene. The victim's vehicle appeared to have been wrecked or come to a stop in front of a tree on the shoulder of the road.
Police immediately launch an investigation into the horrific attack on the young mother of one.
The road patrol deputies who arrived on scene did a very good job of clearing out the area and putting up crime scene tape.
Family members were arriving, witnesses were standing there, and investigators were already starting to try to locate evidence.
They had identified shell casings in the roadway that was further back on the road from where the vehicle was. And we also had the placement of the bullet holes in the victim's vehicle. It had what appeared to be a bullet hole in the front windshield directed towards the driver, I believe. And then we had some in the driver's side of the vehicle.
Investigators carefully examine the crime scene as they try to build a picture of how events unfolded that morning.
The initial information we had was passed on to the investigators. We determined who was going to do what job. So I took over doing the crime scene portion of the scene and collecting the evidence. I had another few investigators with me that were assisting me with that. We marked everything, took photos of where everything was at, took measurements of where the items were at. We had broken glass in the roadway from where the vehicle was hit. There was a long trail of fluid that had leaked from the vehicle all the way back closer to where her house was, showing that that's likely where the vehicle's first struck by the projectiles. I contacted our drone team to come out, and they flew our drone through the area, filming videos from different altitudes in order to document where the vehicle was and where all the evidence was at before we picked anything up off the ground.
In their hunt for the gunman, police need to build up a victim profile that will help them understand the crime. They start by talking to the people closest to Gillian, her friends and family.
I just got an overlay of what was going on, and then we had some leads to quickly get onto, so I went off and started talking to people, interviewing them.
I arrived on scene and immediately was directed to where her sister, her mother, her son, and her grandfather were, and asked to speak with them and meet with them and provide basic initial victim services.
I did briefly speak with Gillian's grandfather, who was there, and I escorted him out of our crime scene off the roadway into a deputy's vehicle so he could sit down. He had gotten a phone call from a family member who was asking him if he heard the shots that were fired, because the family's home was only a few hundred yards away from where her vehicle came to a stop.
We learned that she was an outgoing person. She had a 6-year-old son who she was deeply in love with. Everything she did was for him. She would go to work at the pharmacy where she worked at locally, and she would come home and help him and take care of him. Everybody at the pharmacy was heartbroken to hear about this. They just knew her because she would talk to every single person that would come in there, and everybody in her family and all the local friends that were just couldn't believe that something like this would happen to her.
Gillian's family members have their own ideas on who was behind the savage attack. One name surfaces time and time again: John Patrick Shea.
John Patrick Shea had dated Gillian for about 5 months. It wasn't even that long.
We knew that she had previous boyfriends that we needed to follow up on, but John Patrick Shea kept coming back as the person that we needed to make sure that we interviewed.
Her sister had described an incident a couple months prior to Gillian being shot where John Patrick Shea and Gillian had taken a trip with Gillian's son to North Carolina, and that there appeared to have been an argument surrounding the 6-year-old son.
At one point, Patrick is trying to discipline the child. The relationship really wasn't at a point where that would really be appropriate. And she's like, no, this is not your territory. And he gets upset and he leaves for hours. Once she got home, she was like, you know what? I don't want my child around this man, and the time is now to cut things off. Unfortunately, Patrick wouldn't take no for an answer, and that's when he began stalking her.
Investigators need to speak to John Patrick Shea to find out if he is behind the brutal attack that has left a young mother in hospital fighting for her life. March 2023. Bluffton Police Department in South Carolina have launched an investigation following the shooting of 24-year-old Gillian Angner while driving her 6-year-old son to school. Gillian is left fighting for her life in hospital while the gunman remains at large.
I had spoken to her a handful of months prior to this incident happening, where she had reached out to find out how to obtain a restraining order against John Patrick Shea. She needed the prior police report numbers that she had filed with local agencies as well as with the sheriff's office, and I provided her with all of that information so that she could go to court and present it to a judge.
Unfortunately, at the time, there was not enough for her to get that restraining order or proceed on that burglary case.
The other investigators talked to him pretty early on to at least get an initial statement from him about where he was to further progress our investigation.
We did go find John Patrick Shea and then ask him about his whereabouts that morning. He said he was out at the bar the night before on Hilton Head, and he got a ride home at like 2 a.m. from a friend, and we did talk to her, and she did corroborate that part of his statement. He drove there that night, and then he ended up leaving his car there, and then we saw later on Thursday morning, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, he went back and picked his car up.
Then police receive a new lead in their investigation from an unlikely source.
There was a painting van that was going in the opposite direction that actually saw Jillian's car. When they came back around, they saw law enforcement and spoke to them and searched their memory. Well, did we see anyone else on this road? And they were able to describe what they believed to be a Ford F-150, dark in color with halo headlights, that was going at a high rate of speed. And then through the community of Bluffton, they are able to pull surveillance footage from a number of different places.
They located a Ring camera which spotted an F-150 in the parking lot area around the same time as the shooting, and when they tracked that down, they found the driver of the vehicle.
So that information was passed on to our road deputies, the ones that are on the street answering calls every day, going around and patrolling neighborhoods. We're looking for this type of vehicle. Please keep an eye out for it. A few days later, a road deputy spotted that vehicle and was able to follow it to where it was being parked at, and we were able to get the license plate and determine who it belonged to and further our investigation from that.
The driver was Wyatt Norton. We figured out where he lived, so I went and asked him his whereabouts, and he said he was at home sleeping, and he let a friend, or a guy he knows as Zach, borrow his truck.
Norton's story about his truck raises suspicions that he might be involved in the attack.
My initial gut reaction was he wasn't telling us the whole truth, if any. I did show him a picture of his truck and told him that his truck was seen in Bluffton, and so he continued with the story.
If you get too focused on just one suspect and don't keep your possibilities open to everything else around, it leads to tunnel vision, and also it can lead you astray. It was just as important to get alibis for all the people that we didn't think were involved as to get the story from Wyatt and Shea, because all those things come to bear in court.
We also took Jillian's car to the local police department, and we did a search warrant on that and recovered all the projectiles as we could from it and any other evidence.
I was tasked with interviewing another boyfriend who had been talking to Jillian around this time frame, and I went to the other side of the county where he lived, tracked him down, found out that he was at work around the time of the shooting and had an alibi, putting him on the other side of the county when it happened.
It's at this point that the Bluffton Police Department receives a call from Wyatt Norton.
He ended up calling the office and saying that he wanted to talk to us, and he didn't tell us the whole truth initially, and he wanted to meet with us with his lawyer. We met with him, and he laid everything out with us, and everything he told us matched up what we were finding with Jillian's car, with the scene there on Harrison Island Road.
He knew Patrick through the food and beverage industry. They were not particularly close, but he had asked him if he wanted to earn some extra money and do this drug run.
He was just supposed to give John Patrick Shea a ride to either drop off some dope or get some dope. That was the entire premise that he thought he was doing. And John Patrick Shea offered to pay him quite a bit of money to do this.
They had literally been in touch with each other over the week prior to try and get together and do this run. When he picked him up on March 2nd at 6:45, Patrick had a black backpack that Wyatt assumed the drugs were in. Later, obviously, he found out that he also had gloves, a ski mask, and a 9mm in there.
He described where they parked on the side of a little dirt road off of Harrison Island. They watched a car leave the house, Jillian's house. He described the car. He said that John Patrick Shea shot through his driver window, and then after Jillian drove by, he shot again out the passenger, and all of that corroborated the trajectory of the bullets that we found in the vehicle.
Everything happened so quickly, he didn't even know who was in the car or if anyone had been shot.
After John shot at Jillian in her vehicle, apparently John Patrick Shea pointed the gun and put it in Wyatt's ribs and told him to drive. And eventually, if you talk about this at all, if I hear anything about this, I'm coming after you and your family.
Following Wyatt's testimony to police, the focus of the investigation shifts to John Patrick Shea.
Shortly after the interview, within 24 hours, we were getting arrest warrants and we started staking out John Patrick Shea's apartment and just seeing what he was going to do.
After Wyatt gave his statement and we had an idea of the time frame, we knew where the neighborhood was, where the incident happened, and then where Patrick lived, so we knew around what time Wyatt was going to be bringing him back to his house and dropping him off. There's only a couple of ways to get to that apartment complex. I went and got some video footage and reviewed it from a gas station that's right near the apartment complex and was able to get that distinct truck on video coming back right during the time frame where he was bringing him back after the shooting happened. So that was one of the pieces that we had to corroborate what Wyatt was telling us.
John Patrick Shea is a very interesting guy. He was very into the occult. He was a self-proclaimed Satanist. I'm not sure how much Jillian would have even known about that when they first met.
I interviewed Jillian's roommate who actually lived in the residence with her, and she did mention John Patrick Shea as being a source of trouble.
The way he was acting just kind of, I guess, made him scared for her. She had a break-in at her residence October the year prior, and everybody thought he was involved in that as well.
There was no forced entry, but at one point he had the lock code. A pentagram was scrawled into one of the TVs and was scrawled into another one of the TVs. And that was after a night where Patrick had run into Jillian at a bar in Savannah called the Barrel House and had seen her talking to some other guys, and it had just set him off.
With police now closing in on John Patrick Shea, Jillian's family continue to wait by her hospital bed, praying she will recover from her injuries.
Jillian's mother, when we met, she had already provided her basic statement to responding officers, and so ultimately my goal was to provide any sort of comfort and be there to liaison between them and law enforcement. I had an incredibly hard time with Jillian's son. For a 6-year-old boy, it was really impressive how he carried himself. He really had a lot of courage. The one thing that her son said that really stuck with me as a victim advocate was that he was really worried about his mom's heart. Because he had seen his mother get shot, he was worried about her heart.
When an intimate partner crime occurs after the breakup of a relationship and there has been stalking involved, the actual event can seem like it's occurring out of the blue or at a very random location or a random time. Behind the scenes, there is often considerable planning involved on the part of the perpetrator, who has decided that since he is unable to convince his partner to return to the relationship, that he is going to carry out the age-old thought of, if I can't have her, no one can.
The signs were there, and after the breakup, those reports started coming in, and Ultimately, if they had seen that as escalation, perhaps this could have been preventable.
When she broke things off with Patrick reached out to one of her friends and said, do you think there's any hope of Jill and I getting back together? She said, no. I think she's made it very clear. You should probably move on. And his last words to her were, well, I'm not going to give up.
Wyatt's testimony convinces investigators that John Patrick Shea is the shooter, who, in a fit of jealous anger, recklessly fired a handgun at Gillian's car. Bluffton Police Department are closing in on 29-year-old John Patrick Shea, who they believe is responsible for the shooting of 24-year-old Gillian Angner while driving her 6-year-old son to school, leaving the mother fighting for her life in hospital. Gillian had been in a brief relationship with Shea, which she left after his controlling behavior towards her and her 6-year-old child.
He was very jealous. He did not want to give up on Gillian. She was a young, pretty girl and didn't have any trouble getting a date, so I just don't think it was very meaningful to her.
Shea was driven to the crime scene by Wyatt Norton, who believed he was only doing a drug run for extra money.
I think everything he told us was very vital, being as he's telling you that he was involved in this heinous crime. You kind of want to make sure you double check everything. I 100% believed him. He showed the emotions that you should show when you're coming clean and telling law enforcement what you did. After our interview, he ended up taking us back there to the crime scene and reiterated what he told us and kind of showed us where everything was.
Police now make the move to arrest John Patrick Shea before he can escape justice.
We ended up making another phone call to John Patrick Shea from Wyatt, and it was within 15-20 minutes after that, John Patrick Shea was leaving his house with a guitar and a suitcase. He had his passport and, items that you wouldn't normally take to just leave for a few hours or so. It appeared he was just trying to get out of the area.
He had his birth certificate. He also, oddly, obsessively, had nude pictures of Gillian with him.
We had the arrest warrant at that point. Members of our violent crime task force went in and approached him and took him into custody.
I think he probably had a clue that police were going to be coming for him very soon. So for them to arrest him as he's packing his bags to get the heck out of Dodge, I think that shows just the tenacity of the investigators and the court system to ensure that he wasn't able to flee.
When I knew that we had eyes on him and that the judge had signed the arrest warrant for him, I said, when we make the arrest, I want to be the one that calls the family to tell them. And the utter relief that could be heard on the other end of the line, it was loud.
We ended up taking him back in and doing an interview with him afterwards. When I presented him with the arrest warrants that he had, he said initially he had nothing to do with it. He knew exactly what had happened and, the guilt was getting to him, and he knew he needed to try to help himself. He asked if he could talk to a lawyer, and then eventually he said, well, what's in it for me? Let's make a deal type thing.
Investigators continue to build their case against John Patrick Shea, who now faces multiple criminal charges, including the attempted murder of Gillian and her 6-year-old son, discharging a firearm into an occupied vehicle, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
His cell phone was ultimately seized from him, and eventually a search warrant was obtained to search that cell phone, and it was turned over to me to examine. We were able to recover some deleted text messages going back and forth, planning to meet up, planning to do something, Wyatt canceling.
Looking through the text messages, they tried to do it Tuesday morning, but John Patrick Shea's roommate was still awake, so he told Wyatt, hey, we can't do it today.
I wouldn't say it was spelled out, but it was clear that they were both communicating back and forth in order to go and do something which matched up with what Wyatt had told us.
Wednesday morning they tried to do it as well, but Wyatt Norton woke up late, so they weren't going to make the time. There was a specific time that John Patrick Shea wanted to do this. Then they eventually got to it Thursday morning, so John Patrick Shea thought about doing this.
Police search John Patrick Shea's home and make some disturbing discoveries.
We got a search warrant for his apartment as well. There was actually a drawing on a notepad of a truck that looked like Wyatt's F-150 and a gun, which I thought was strange. And then also he had somewhat of a shrine to some voodoo stuff, like a couple voodoo dolls were in there. There were many pictures of Jillian. One of the pictures actually had red wax on it.
He had a number of books on the occult. He had defaced pictures of Jillian that were hidden behind various things in his apartment.
Lots of very disturbing things were found during that search. Clearly, his obsession had grown and become ritualistic, unhealthy, from the voodoo dolls to satanic components and a shrine to her.
It didn't really affect the way I approached the investigation. I felt like someone could have reached this level of obsession, or someone could have done terrible things like this without having that sort of thing involved. And I don't know that I put a lot of stock into how much of involvement that was in this case. I felt like we were dealing with someone who was obsessed. It seemed like the family were pretty well aware of that. It seemed like his friends were well aware of that. And it just led him down this path.
We definitely took all of the photos of Jillian. We took the voodoo dolls, the notebook, the drawing, which to me kind of showed why else would you draw a truck and a gun like that? He didn't own any trucks or anything.
His roommate told us Patrick tried to, date around a little bit, but with every failed relationship, he kept spiraling and he began to drink more.
There was a list of 10, 15, 20 female names on there. He was very obsessive. He got a hold of something and he wanted to keep it for himself.
It was just kind of like one of those very odd, obviously obsessive behaviors where somebody would catalog every female that he had physically ever done anything with for a period of years. Females that he had been involved with since it appeared middle school.
The fact that he had a shrine in his home that was of her really indicates a very extreme level of obsession and possessiveness that goes well beyond the bounds of what we would typically describe as sort of normal levels of jealousy when a relationship ends and one of the partners decides to move on and seek new relationships.
The music got louder and angrier. The rituals and ceremonies that he did got more frequent. He would stay up later and later. The general behavior and chaos of the apartment had just kind of spiraled at that point.
John Patrick Shea is charged with the attempted murder of Jillian Angner and placed in custody while awaiting trial.
We didn't have the smoking gun, as they say, but we had a key witness, first-hand knowledge of the events that matched all the evidence we collected.
Wyatt was never charged with anything because the investigation and me as the prosecutor believed that he was in a position, once this all went down in front of him, that he was under duress driving while he had a gun poked into his ribs.
Jillian's family continue waiting by her hospital bedside, but with no hope of recovery, they finally agree to switch off her life support machine on August the 5th, 2023.
When Jillian was shot in the neck, it entered through the left side and it exited the right side. Immediately, she needed medical assistance to remain alive. And so she was in a vegetative state for about 5 months before the family had to make that terrible decision to take her off the breathing machines.
I met the family within 30 minutes of this incident occurring, and I remained in contact with members of her family up until the day that she was removed from life support.
After Gillian's death, John Patrick Shea's charge is upgraded to murder on the 6th of August 2023.
When Gillian ended up being taken off life support at the hospital, I served him with a murder warrant at the jail, and the only thing he asked me was, "Is Wyatt okay?"
As soon as John Patrick Shea shot Gillian, he turned the gun on Wyatt and said, "Drive." So that's why Wyatt did not immediately come forward. But eventually, within 48 hours, he had to come to Jesus with his parents, and he knew what he had to do. And he was very forthright in all of our pretrial meetings, very emotional, really felt for Gillian's family and what they must have been going through.
In my experience, I have not encountered very many intimate partner homicides where a third person is involved, even unwittingly, as someone who ended up driving the getaway vehicle. And that, I think, is quite an unusual aspect of this case.
Gillian's grieving family now wait for their day in court, when John Patrick Shea will finally go on trial for the pain and suffering he has inflicted upon them. Beaufort County, South Carolina. 29-year-old John Patrick Shea is in police custody, awaiting trial for the murder of his ex-girlfriend Gillian Angner in March 2023.
We were in meeting with the solicitor's office and all the other investigators that worked on this, just going over all of the evidence, making sure that you know everything, just what kind of questions the defense might have for you.
He had gone to the bar the night before. I went and obtained video footage from that bar. We ended up not only going through and getting several clips saved off of that surveillance system, but we ended up taking the whole DVR just because of the case it was, that we were worried that it was going to overwrite itself. The business owner was very cooperative with us and let us do that just because of the nature of the case.
You get the forensic evidence, you get the digital evidence, you package that up and you make the arrest and you start building your case.
We were certainly ready. We did have all of our witnesses lined up. Certain things I think we were going to be allowed to use, such as the defaced pictures of Gillian, but there is a lot of the witchcraft that he was involved in that, while it shows him as being kind of a weird, bizarre person, would not have been admissible in trial. It would be more prejudicial than probative, was the judge's ruling.
On the 24th of April 2025, John Patrick Shea goes on trial for the murder of 24-year-old Gillian Angner.
I sat in the witness box and I testified to the evidence that I collected. I testified briefly to some of the interviews I conducted.
I was really proud of Wyatt for having the strength to get up there and get on the stand and admit that he was a part of this horrible thing. He knew he had to make it right.
That was some overwhelming evidence. You've got video evidence of the vehicle pulling in. You've got the individual driving the vehicle testifying. So you add all of that evidence up, and at some point, I have to assume he realized that the outcome was not going to be in his favor if it went to a jury.
On the second day of the murder trial, John Patrick Shea's lawyer asks to address the court.
Wednesday morning, they're getting ready to do the second day of prosecution interviews, witnesses, and John Patrick Shea just said he wanted to plead guilty.
John Patrick Shea ended up changing his plea of not guilty and wanted to plead guilty and throw himself at the mercy of the court.
After the first day, and Wyatt Norton testified, and a couple investigators, he realized that I'm guilty. They're going to prove it.
My feeling is that his decision on the second day to turn around and plead guilty was a very self-serving decision in order to save himself from a more serious penalty or potentially the death penalty. That he thought the smartest move, I guess, at that point was to turn around and plead guilty.
It surprised me how late in the game he decided to plead. Most of the time when someone's waiting, they wait until right before the testimony starts if they're going to change their plea, or sometimes they wait until the end of the prosecution's case. I can only assume that there was something in the testimony or in the evidence that he didn't fully realize or didn't know about that either pricked his conscience or just made him not want to go through with the rest of the trial.
We took the defendant's plea so that we could let the jury go if they wanted to, and then we had to reconvene a couple hours later for the sentencing phase, and the judge did invite the members of the jury who would have rendered the guilty or not guilty verdict to come watch, and a number of them did come back.
John Patrick Shea returns to court to receive his sentence on the 25th of June.
At his sentencing, he got up and gave a statement about his regret or remorse, or however you want to put it.
I think it is an act of desperation and can be something that individuals will do when they feel the walls closing in on them. But I think that's just another example of his very manipulative personality. And yet again, he's working hard to manipulate the perceptions of others to paint himself in a good light.
The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that was the maximum sentence he could have been given. 30 years was the minimum.
With John Patrick Shea safely behind bars for his crimes, the residents of Bluffton are left wondering how a crime like this could happen in their close-knit community.
Jillian was well liked by everyone in the community. Everyone was distraught by the incident and everyone was deeply affected.
Everybody in that area was very helpful during the investigation. It's just good to know that when something bad does happen, we can get the outcome that that we need to get and try to help the family move on.
Everything just went the way it needed to. We all worked together and exchanged the information that needed to be exchanged in order to get a violent person, an unstable person, in jail where he belongs.
They got the evidence. They were able to arrest him before he fled. The investigators built a seemingly airtight case to hand over to prosecutors, and the prosecutors got it ready and they took it to trial and managed to get a plea deal. I mean, you can't come up with a better outcome for a crime.
Cases like that of Jillian Angner reveal the violence and control inflicted by domestic abusers on their partners and relatives.
There are different kinds of domestic violence perpetrators, but the ones we worry about, the ones who are into the power and control dynamics, what I find so scary about them is their ability to manipulate the perceptions of other people. And part of that is their ability to manipulate the perceptions of victims themselves, that no one would ever want them. They shouldn't leave the relationship because this is as good as it's going to get.
If there are any victims of domestic violence, stalking, harassment, any of those behaviors, there are resources wherever you're located. I would genuinely urge you to talk to whoever you're close to, somebody that you can confide in, or reach out to your local law enforcement agency and ask them for assistance. That's why we're here and we want to help.
You need to let people know. Because a lot of times people feel like they don't want to be a burden for their family members or friends. But if you're having an issue with a loved one or somebody in a past relationship, you need to communicate, to law enforcement, so we can help you any way we can, and to your friends and family so that they can, kind of keep their eyes out for you and try to help you.
Gillian's devastating death at such an early age leaves a lasting impact on her family and friends.
It's a very sad case indeed, and she was very young, and her son was very young and is now going to grow up without his mother and has the additional burden of the trauma of having been there when she lost her life in such a horrific way.
Gillian's family, they have custody of her son. She is always going to be missed. They definitely still advocate for Gillian. They do speak out and I think want to give back to the community and keep Gillian's memory alive.
That family is never going to get that piece back that they had. The piece is missing now. I know that they're a very strong family and I pray for them.
I still think about her son. I hope he knows how strong she was. She fought after being shot multiple times. And I hope it brings awareness to domestic violence, to stalking, to threatening behavior following relationships.
The dynamics of relationships have changed as society has changed. Looking at someone's location, following them on your Snapchat map or your Life 360 or your Facebook Live, having all these details right at the tips of our fingers in today's day and age, that's not healthy. And that's how people become fixated on others. Just be cognizant about it because you really don't know who's watching.
California, October 27th, 2021. Rosemary Espinoza is found brutally beaten and left for dead in a pool of her own blood.
A neighbor that lived across the street saw a dark SUV type vehicle speed off going eastbound from the residence at a high rate of speed.
Immediately when I arrived, I vividly remember seeing the driveway. There was what appeared to be tire tracks and blood. So we knew right away that we had crime.
I just was driving really fast to get to the hospital because I didn't know if she was still alive.
Despite the efforts of the emergency responders, Rosemary is beyond saving.
It was really hard that day, I remember. It was a lot of emotions and it was a lot, yeah.
She was like the glue that kept us together. So when she was gone, it was a horrible nightmare.
Every family has their secrets.
He was extremely jealous. He had a very bad temper. He was convinced that Rosemary was dating somebody.
He was pretty much capable of doing anything to anybody. We needed him to be apprehended as soon as possible before somebody else would get hurt.
San Jose, California, is a suburban city in the heart of Silicon Valley, known for its quiet neighborhoods and family-focused community.
San Jose, suburb of San Francisco, it's sort of a great microcosm of a lot of these big counties in Southern California. There's like the top 28 biggest counties, Ventura, San Jose. They all share these similarities of you're just outside the city, so it is kind of a calm or a calmer life. It's very suburban, it's very working class.
We do have a lot of outdoor activities, parks, beaches aren't too far away. We have people from all walks of life, from every culture, that live in San Jose. One of the safest big cities I have ever been in, which is nice. Relatively clean as big cities go.
It's different. It's Silicon Valley. Growing up when I was a kid, it was very different. It wasn't as busy. It was very, it wasn't as techy as it is now. So I think now it's just busy, on the go, rushed all day.
But that sense of safety is shattered on October 27th, 2021, when 53-year-old Rosemary Sanchez Espinoza is brutally attacked outside her nephew's home.
There was a gentleman riding his bicycle down Geraldine Drive, and as he was riding his bicycle, he noticed an adult female who was lying face up in a driveway, presumably unconscious. He noticed that she had a lot of head trauma, active bleeding from her head. There was CPR in progress when the deputies arrived on scene. The fire department was there. Our emergency medical services were there rendering aid. And so we knew right away that this was probably going to be either an assault that resulted in great bodily injury or a death.
This house was located on Geraldine Drive, and they immediately transported the female to the hospital for further medical aid.
Rosemary is rushed to the hospital with her family not far behind.
I just took charge and I just started calling everybody, and I think it just started going down and everybody started coming. One person told another person came, and it was 25 people or more, and we were just waiting to hear the news.
Not knowing, it's just your mind goes all over the place. We really didn't know what was going on. I was really anxious. I was scared. I mean, it was just really like a nightmare that you can't wake up from.
Later, we found out that she passed away when they came out. They told us about it. So it was really hard to hear that she passed away. And it was really hard to comprehend that. And yeah, it was really a lot of emotions.
We're 2 years apart, so we did go to the same junior high for a little bit and then the same high school. We always shared a room. That helped us bond a lot more, and we were very, very close. And too, as adults as well. She liked the outdoors. She really loved the beach. Santa Cruz was her favorite place. I know she liked to read a lot and just spending time with her family.
My mom was very unique. She's special. She was a girly girl. She loved shopping. She was my best friend. There was nobody that didn't like her. She grew up as a teenager in the 80s, so she loved going to the movie theater. She would be seeing movies really often with my brothers.
She always showed us movies, watched horror movies and just Lifetime movies. She was always cooking for us, always making big meals because there was all of us kids, so she fed us all. And then my cousins, at different times in life, they lived with us too, so then she had to feed them as well. She did take us to a lot of places. We went to Magic Mountain over in LA, and I remember the memory of us going, my cousins, and first time, it was really nice. We got to see Magic Mountain, how it was. We got the Superman ride they had at the time. It wasn't working, and it was one of the fastest rides because it went super fast, but it was broken. But we went on the other rides there. It was really fun, especially for us as kids because we'd never been there. And then we went to Hollywood. We got to see that, the Walk of Fame, the stars. Seeing it from the movies and then seeing it in real life was different. So it was really nice. Those are good memories we have.
My mom loved being a grandma, and that was something that was huge in her life, was her grandkids.
My greatest memory was her taking me to church as a kid, and I hated it. I didn't want to go, but I just loved spending time with my aunt, so I just remember being in the car listening to oldies or gospels.
My mom was a huge 80s fan. She loved it so much that I used to kind of tease her about it, and I kind of didn't really like it. I was like, Mom, you're always playing this music. And I said, Mom, you're playing it so much. I was just joking, and I said, I'm going to play it at your funeral. And it was actually bittersweet. I did play Simple Minds, Don't Forget About Me. It was really beautiful to have with her photos and remembering her life.
The investigation into Rosemary's murder begins with a forensic examination of the crime scene.
As soon as we got the notification that there was a possible homicide, we got together, we drove to the scene, and when we arrived, the deputies had already cordoned off the crime scene, and we were provided the details known at the time about what had happened. A neighbor that lived across the street saw a dark SUV type vehicle speed off, going eastbound from the residence at a high rate of speed.
But she said she still didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But given the fact that she was on her porch at the time and she had large shrubs in her front yard, she didn't notice Rosemary laying in the ground.
She was on the driveway, partially behind another vehicle that was parked in the driveway. They also noticed that there was blood on the ground, tire tracks. They also noticed that there was apparent tire tracks on her abdomen area and her right arm. They also noticed blood on the A and B pillars of a silver vehicle that was parked in the driveway.
We searched the car, and initially we found blood on the transmission shifter. We found traces of blood on the steering wheel. There was trace amount of blood elsewhere in the vehicle. We found what turned out to be Rosemary's purse in the vehicle, and we found a smartphone that was in the rear driver's side seat of the vehicle. There was also an Ethernet cable that was in the rear of the vehicle, and it looked like the Ethernet cable had red stains, possibly blood, and hair on it. And so we determined that all of these pieces of evidence were relevant to the crime.
As detectives begin to question Rosemary's immediate family, it becomes evident that estranged husband, Ignacio Espinoza, has a history of violence towards her. He quickly becomes their person of interest, and the hunt to locate him begins. In October 2021, police in San Jose, California, are investigating the murder of 53-year-old Rosemary Sanchez Espinoza, who was severely beaten and later died from her injuries. It doesn't take long for investigators to identify a prime suspect.
During our follow-up investigation, we learned that Rosemary was married to Ignacio Espinoza for many years, and they had children in common, but they had separated because of a long history of domestic violence. From the initial investigation, we went off the evidence that was at the scene, the blood that was located in and around the body of Rosemary Espinoza, the apparent tire tracks on her body, apparent tire tracks leading away from the scene, and the blood on her vehicle. And additionally, we followed up on the information that was provided by the family. At the scene, Ignacio Espinoza, his sister, was the person that owned that residence, and his relatives lived there. Deputies contacted the resident of that house. A subject came out who identified himself as the nephew of the woman that was transported. He said he was asleep, he didn't hear anything. They had cameras at their residence, but they weren't functioning.
He was aware that Rosemary and Ignacio were having marital issues, that there was a history of domestic violence between the two, and that Ignacio had gotten drunk the night prior and had asked him to set up a phone call with Rosemary, asking her to come to the residence.
Based on the evidence that we saw at the scene, it appeared that Ignacio Espinoza assaulted Rosemary, and during that assault potentially used an Ethernet cable to maybe strangle her. And it also appeared that she was also assaulted outside her vehicle, because she was found directly behind her vehicle partially on the sidewalk and driveway, and she was beaten. Her face was beaten. When I saw the photos of her injuries, her face was swollen. There was a lot of blood. There was a laceration underneath her chin, and then these marks on her abdomen area and her right arm. The right arm appeared to be like road rash, maybe from tires. The evidence suggested that he used his vehicle to run her over. Initially, when we started an investigation, our job is to find the truth about what happened. And so when somebody is accused of committing a crime, we as investigators have to gather the evidence and make that connection. There's a connection between the victim, the evidence, and the suspect. Like a triangle. If you connect that triangle, there's a connection to the crime. So because somebody is accused of committing a crime, just a mere accusation is not enough for investigators. We have to make that connection through the evidence of why this person committed this crime.
To better understand Ignacio and Rosemary's relationship, detectives turned to the people closest to them.
She was with her husband since she was, 15 or 16.
They were both teenage parents. They had me. And so you can imagine that was very hard. Since they were so young, there was so many struggles, and they were, very immature, and they had 4 children together. And it was a lot of, I think, splitting up and getting back together, and just kind of like a roller coaster of a relationship. But they did end up getting married. I think that probably that wasn't something that a lot of people agreed with, but from the footage and from what I remember being in the wedding, it was still like a celebration. I have a pretty diverse family, mixed with my mom and dad's side, and I would say it's very different on both sides. On my mom's side, it was very Americanized, and a lot of traditional American values and celebrations, and it was really happy. But on my dad's side, it was different. It was more strict, religious, and there was good times on both of the families, but every family has their secrets. My dad had a lot of substance abuse issues, alcohol abuse, and he had a lot of anger and a lot of internal conflict that he was dealing with, and that came out in the relationship. And my dad was in prison many of those years, and he was in and out of jail before he went to prison. He went to prison because he raped and molested me. He served, I believe, about 14 years. My dad's family hired a private attorney, and he was a really good defense attorney, and that got him, I think it went from 60 plus years, it dropped down to 14. And so he was released.
We didn't really talk to him because he was going to Mexico a lot. He would be there for 6 months and then come back and see us for a month or 2 and then go back.
There was times that he did go when he was in trouble with the law here. He would go, there's family there, and he would stay with, and then he'd wait until things died down, and he would come back until the next time that he was in trouble again, and then he would either go back to Mexico and hide out, or he'd go to jail. One of the two. He
was back and forth going there, so I guess in that time he had a little fling, which is a side piece girlfriend that he had, that he was seeing, and then my mom found out, and then that's when she wanted to divorce him. When that happened, I remember her telling us about it, and my dad was living with us, so then after she kicked him out, we didn't see him really anymore at all.
But it wouldn't be long before Ignacio Espinosa pays Rosemary another visit.
We learned that the last time there was domestic violence between them was in December of 2020. He actually assaulted her, strangled her unconscious, and threatened to kill her. At that time, her adult children decided that they weren't going to call the police about this assault because one of the things we learned about Ignacio Espinosa is that he was a two-striker.
And they knew that if he goes back to jail for this, and that's 3 strikes, and the prison sentence would be exponentially, more severe.
She told me that he would never do anything to her because he didn't want to go back to prison. And so she said that quite often, but I guess, there was a final straw, and she decided to go do it. I remember when she called me and told me that she finally went and got the restraining order. And I told her, oh my God, thank you. Finally. I just said, you can't trust him. You just really can't trust him. She's finally taking care of herself. She lost a lot of weight. She was feeling more confident. She was very happy. She was just, I think the last year she was alive, she was making really drastic changes, but for the better. And she finally had the confidence in herself to close that chapter and start a new chapter. She was going to start a new job. She was very happy about that. She was very excited and hopeful to her new life and future. She still had a lot of things that she wanted to, experience and do. Being, she was with her husband since she was 15 or 16. Here she was already in her 50s. I mean, that sometimes change is hard, but she was ready for it.
But watching Rosemary thrive without him will only inflame Ignacio Espinosa further, turning jealousy into something far more dangerous. San Jose, California. In the months leading up to her murder in 2021, Rosemary Sanchez Espinosa's ex-husband Ignacio displays changes in his behavior. But the worst is still yet to come.
That last year, he was distanced from the family, from his family, and from my mom and my brothers and his siblings. He was living with his sister. He was staying in his car, and I don't know if he was staying inside of the house also. He was in a relationship with someone else already, and he was living in Mexico half of the year and coming back and living with his sister, and we really thought that he had moved on because he was in a new relationship. And for him to just, I guess the word is snapped. It was a shock because he's starting a whole new life and they're in the process of getting divorced. And then he starts to obsess over my mom. It just really didn't make any sense.
He changed for the worst, and then that's when he really just became this evil person that was bad, and all he cared about was what he wanted. And so he became really jealous after when he found out my mom wanted to divorce him, so he didn't take that well. I think he felt like my mom was his.
He was extremely jealous. He had a very bad temper. He was convinced that Rosemary was dating somebody, and so because of that, because of his jealousy, he was stalking her. He was trying to place tracking devices on her vehicle to see where she was at. So he was very determined to find out if she was dating somebody else.
The person that she had a relationship, it was definitely a special type of relationship. because the man was in prison. So they didn't actually physically meet, but they would have visits over Zoom because this was during COVID. This person actually was a family friend, and my dad did not know. He had it in his head that he thought she was in a relationship, but he didn't know that it was somebody in prison. He just knew that it was someone, but he didn't know that it was this person. He started to have these thoughts and these obsessions, and he was making these really crazy accusations that didn't even make sense. And I think maybe it might have been due to his mental health, maybe drug abuse, alcohol abuse. I think all of those factors.
When talking about motives for murder, a lot of other factors, though, can come into play, such as mental health, right? Instability. There is obviously monetary gain. So it's really situational. We never want to jump to one conclusion over the other until we have all of the facts and circumstances. But in this case, it became very apparent very quickly what the motive was, just based on all of the statements, based on Ignacio's history, based on the phone conversations he had with his son. It became very apparent that it was, hey, if I can't have her, nobody else is going to have her.
With Espinosa as the clear suspect, detectives turned to his family for information on his whereabouts.
Ignacio had basically told all of his family members that we interviewed that he had intended to kill Rosemary if he had found out she was ever dating somebody else. In the process of our interviews with these family members, in asking them if you think Ignacio is capable of something like this, I think virtually all of them, except for one, said yes, without hesitation.
My first interaction with them was just like, what can I do to help you? What phone numbers? I was just on my phone. I was trying to be like a resource to help them get as much information to solve this as quickly as possible, because I already have experience with the law and with my dad's history, and so I kind of know how things work. I was really helpful in getting everything as far as like the make and model of his car, his license plate. I was calling the insurance agent and trying to get all that information. I'm thankful that my dad's side of the family did do the right thing in the end, and they did actually help facilitate him getting arrested. They were a big part of that.
Lieutenant Vega and I were talking to the family, interviewing the family about Rosemary Espinosa and Ignacio's relationship and the incidents that have led up to this event. Ignacio Espinosa's sister came into the interview room, informed us that Ignacio Espinosa had gone to the city of Manteca, which is approximately an hour and a half east of Santa Clara County, and he had arrived at their cousin's house.
He tried to tell them a fake story that he caught my mom cheating, that he was leaving her and there was an accident, so he was trying to go to Mexico and take the Greyhound.
Being in San Jose, there was no feasible expectation that we were going to get to Modesto, which is probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours from San Jose, before Ignacio would get there from Manteca, which is much shorter.
If you're going to drive, it would take 9 to 10 hours. Greyhound might take longer because they make numerous stops. So we kind of had to hurry up to see if we can contact him before he fled. So Lieutenant Vega and I contacted the cousin that lived in Modesto and talked to him on the phone. They informed us that they had just got an Uber ride for Ignacio Espinosa to go to Modesto. We kept them on the phone and had them track the Uber ride live and give us updates of where he was located. We also contacted the Modesto Police Department.
You know, law enforcement coordination, it really depends on the severity of the crime, how busy the other law enforcement agency is, things like that. But when you request help for a possible homicide suspect, everybody is very willing to do it.
And we're able to give him a description of what he was wearing. The cousins that lived in Manteca informed us that Ignacio Espinoza was wearing a green A's jersey, baseball jersey, and blue jeans. And he was carrying a black backpack.
The race is on to catch Ignacio Espinoza before he escapes to Mexico. October 2021. Ignacio Espinoza is en route to Mexico to evade justice for the alleged murder of his ex-wife. But detectives are closing in on him.
He had a plan to take a bus from the Modesto Transit Center down to Tijuana, Mexico, to flee.
He was pretty much capable of doing anything to anybody. We needed him to be apprehended as soon as possible.
Extradition becomes very difficult once you leave the country, and it's an entirely different process that we would have to go through. So we would want to intercept him in the United States. So we told them that we have a person of interest in a homicide. Luckily for us, Modesto had an undercover police unit at the transit center as he arrived, and so they were able to intercept him very quickly. He was detained by Modesto PD. He was arrested and taken back to the police department there. When we got there, we asked him, hey, do you know why we're here? We read him his Miranda rights and everything. And he said he didn't know why we were there. And I asked him to go through, starting from 6 a.m., go through your day, tell me what you did. And very quickly he decided he wanted to speak to a lawyer. He wanted to invoke his right to remain silent and speak to counsel. And so we ended the interview pretty quickly.
We couldn't talk to him anymore because he requested an attorney, but one of the things that we did on the first day was we contacted the Manteca Police Department, because when he got to his cousin's house sometime early in the morning, his cousins weren't home. They were out running errands, and so he went into their backyard, and they had surveillance cameras around their house, and they could see that he was in the backyard using a hose to wash the soles of his shoes, and he was washing other items, and they didn't get home till about 1:30 in the afternoon from running their errands. And so he immediately requested that if they could provide him shoes and clothing and a couple of garbage bags, and he wanted to take a shower. We did collect surveillance video. I was able to see a dark SUV with Ignacio Espinoza driving away. He would have been going eastbound on Geraldine and then going southbound at the corner. And we learned that he left his vehicle right around the corner from his cousin's house in Manteca. And he told them that he would leave it there because the police were looking for him and potentially looking for this vehicle. So the Manteca Police Department, they were able to tow the vehicle for us and store it at their evidence yard. We sent our crime scene unit to the Manteca Police Department where they collected evidence. What they did find was apparent blood on the driver's door handle, on the interior door handle of the driver's door, on the steering wheel, on the gear shift knob, and so they did swabs of all of these findings. Additionally, they lifted up the car, and underneath the vehicle they did locate apparent blood on the tires and a sway bar from the vehicle, and they collected swabs of that apparent blood. Later, when the Santa Clara County Crime Lab tested these swabs, there was a positive ID for Rosemary's DNA on those items.
So all of that physical evidence, all of the circumstantial evidence we have, which depicts Ignacio's character, that places him at the scene of the crime, and just the statements that he had told family members regarding wanting to kill her, we quickly determined that he was guilty of homicide.
On the 28th of October 2021, Ignacio Espinoza is officially charged with Rosemary's murder, but investigators still need to prepare for the trial.
When we were ready to go to this preliminary hearing, Rosemary Espinoza's family showed up, and there was numerous family members that showed up for that hearing. And they actually flew in from different parts of the country just to be there for Rosemary and Ignacio's children, adult children. And when we were about to start the hearing, Ignacio Espinoza decided to plead guilty.
He did do the right thing by pleading so that court case didn't have to go farther than what it did. And maybe that was his conscience, I don't know. But I am thankful for that.
That was a really good feeling and a relief, but at the same time, it opened up a door to like a year or two of just horror.
There was only 3 witnesses. It was just my sister, me, and my cousin. So it was a long process, I remember, and it took a lot out of us.
But it was Ignacio's nephew that revealed the vital information of how his uncle set up the ambush on Rosemary.
She blocked him on her phone, and that's why Ignacio had asked his nephew to call from their phone so that there could be a message that goes through to Rosemary. He tried to talk him out of it, as I recall. He said that he was drunk at the time, and he said, hey, why don't you just go to bed and go to sleep? He had mentioned that he may have been holding a knife or something like that, and so that was kind of, he didn't really want to push the issue and said, okay, I'll do it. And when Rosemary got there, Ignacio was there waiting for her.
It's hard to hear the things that were said in court. And also it was hard seeing him, being that close, in the rows next to him, seeing him walk in, walk out. That was very hard, very triggering for me. There was one time where he didn't want to come to court, so pretty much we went there for nothing because they couldn't do anything. And, all of us are taking time off of work, going, and he just says he's not going to go to court. He doesn't want to go. And there was a lot of delays.
As the case draws to a close, Ignacio Espinoza is sentenced to 126 years in prison.
126 years would be in addition to the 3-strike rule, right? And so you do get a time sentence for just committing homicide in general. The fact that he was a 3-striker, you're going to get more time because of that. And then the weapon enhancement, you're going to get additional time. That means for the rest of his life, he's going to die in prison. And so there's no possibility that he's going to get out. He's already tried to appeal the case once, and it was denied.
He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, what's left of his life, because he's an older man, and he's going to die there alone. I think that is a fair sentence. I mean, others might say different, that he, maybe deserves death because of what he did, but I feel like he should stay there for the rest of his life alone, by himself, with no family, no visitors, no phone calls, no nothing, letters, nothing, and until he dies.
It was hard, but it was good because we finally got justice, and it was what we needed.
While the sentence of Ignacio Espinoza ensured he would never be free again, true closure remains elusive for Rosemary's loved ones.
I'm happy with the sentencing, but I don't really feel like there's closure. I found out that there's a law in California, and he actually has a chance to get out on parole because he's a senior, and after you serve a certain portion of your sentence, and if you reach a certain age, you do have a chance to go up for parole. even if you've killed someone.
Some days I do feel like there's closure, and other days I don't. I thought that, after going to the courts, I went to every court date, and I thought after that's what I would need to hear and be a part of to have closure. But I don't think I have closure myself.
Solving this case would not have been possible without the incredible work of the police force in San Jose and beyond.
I relied a lot on Sergeant Cortez. Our crime scene investigation team is amazing. If it weren't for their meticulous documentation and handling of the evidence, there's no doubt in my mind that all of those pieces of evidence would have been challenged in court. The medical examiner, her team, and their work was excellent. And then the district attorney's team. We all have to collaborate with each other, and we all have to be on the same page. And it's kind of like a chain, right? If there's a link that's weaker than the rest, then the whole chain falls apart. And so we really have to work together really well to make sure these kind of cases get done.
From the initial start of this investigation, it went pretty smooth, if you want to say that, only because of the help from the family. I think it would have been more difficult, but it was resolved so quickly because of the help from the family and their knowledge of the history that he had, the assaultive behaviors, the temper, his motivations, his jealousy. All of that really helped put this case together.
Rosemary's case stands as a devastating reminder of the dangers of domestic violence.
I didn't know that there's a statistic that if somebody strangles you, there's like a really high chance that they will kill you. And when my mom told me that my dad strangled her, I think it was like a year before. And so I think what I would tell people is that if there's someone who hurts you, that they could have a high chance of killing you, and that you have to leave. You really do, because you don't want to die.
If there is domestic violence occurring, always call 911, right? If there is a restraining order violation, always call 911. And it's not, don't be concerned about if somebody's going to get in trouble for it, right? And I think this case is the perfect example of why you don't do that, because things will escalate. Things will happen that are bad. These types of instances, especially with people like Ignacio, don't go away, right? He's going to keep coming back, and he's, in the event that he did find out who her boyfriend was, he may have killed him too. So I would say that always call 911. If there's a restraining order in place, honor it, call 911. We take domestic violence in the United States and in California very seriously because of these issues.
Rosemary's family want her to be remembered for more than just her tragic death.
Hopefully people will remember her for who she was, and not just that she was a victim and of domestic violence, and that she was a beautiful, loving person. I still have her picture on my cell phone. I haven't even changed her name off my call list. I still have her name, and it's been 4 years. So to me, that's how I keep her memory alive. It's like, I know if I, take her picture off my cell phone or my iPad, that I'm gonna forget about her. So it's like I need to keep it there so I can see it every day. To me, that helps me keep her memory alive.
She did a lot of good work, and she cared for people, and she helped out a lot of people. And I think that's the things she'll be remembered for the things that she did in her life. And, I think that speaks volume about the person who you are.
She was a wonderful woman. Everybody loved her. There was never anybody who didn't like her. And yeah, I love her, and she's missed every day.